All right. Thank you all for coming. Happy Earth Day. Woohoo! So we're going to kick off tonight with what we're calling Go Talks. And the idea here is kind of TED Talk style. We've got 6 local innovators who are leaders in this community championing sustainability and across local businesses, education, food and farming, and a host of other topics. So kick off tonight with Seth Tibbott. He is the founder of Turtle Island Foods and Tofurkey, and he's going to tell you more about the story of Turtle Island and what they're up to now. But it's a pretty amazing story of fantastic sustainable business in the Gorge. So here's Seth.
Thank you. First rule of public speaking, always start with a joke. Why did the tofurkey cross the road?
Why?
To prove it wasn't chicken. Okay, there you go. Double entendre. This is the Tofurkey, family-owned business since 1980, and this is the brief: how to grow a sustainable business in 32 easy years. Not so easy years, some, but this is a thing that started actually in 1972. Whoop. Go right back there. Yeah, so this is me in 1972, walking down New York City Street with hair, and at that point, right around that time, I read this book, which is Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lappé. Maybe people have seen that book. And the premise of this book was that animals were an unsustainable protein machine in reverse. You poured in 16 pounds of grain in the top of the machine and it spit out 1 little pound of protein. Didn't make sense. I was a naturalist and I was studying birds and leading wildlife tours with kids in Ohio. And let's go next slide. In 1980, after being a starving naturalist, I decided to be a starving tempeh maker. In this little Hope co-op, they rented me a cafe kitchen that they were only using in the day, and I made tempeh at night in this refrigerator that I pulled out of under the Burnside Bridge with the help of 3 drunks from the Produce Row Cafe, and started Turtle Island Soy Dairy. My idea was, like, we're going to be rich enough to get all of our dreams going and make things happen. This was my business plan. In 1980, I wrote this, and this was what I was going to make: 48 pounds of tempeh a week. And then in March, I was going to raise that to 150 pounds and sell it at the Saturday market. And here in the future, 2 to 5 years, I was going to move to Trout Lake because that's where all my old buddies from outdoor school lived. And that was my thing. And here's my the money side of things. This is Excel minus 5.0. Before there was Excel, we scribbled notes on paper with things called pens. And my rent was $25 a month, and labor, I figured at $3 an hour for 20 hours a week, I got $60 a week, $240 a month. So, you know, that was what the plan was. $50 in advertising, very small, and then I was going to put $64 in the profit pocket there. So that was the thing. I don't know what these scribbles are, but we'll go ahead. Then in 1982, I was tired of working at night in this little cafe, and we got some distribution, so we moved into the old Hewsum School, and it was sitting empty from the logging days of the community of Hewsum, and so I rented this building out for $150 a month, which was great, except that we had there was big headlines in the Enterprise in 1982, not so prosperous. It said, "Tempeh plant opens in Hewsum," and we were getting all these calls from people like, "I'd like to be your secretary," and we were like, "Great, that's right, but we're making $100 a week or something, so we'll let you know." But we were just making tempeh, and then to keep expenses low, I moved into this little tree house that I built and lived there. It was right about 1.5 miles from the tempeh shop, and that kept my overhead low or high. And let's go to the next one. This was also early Excel version. Now we're up to minus 3.0, but there's my weekly sales in 1983, 917, 1,000. And then you can see in December, things always fell down. Here I'm only pulling in $500 a week. So with that in mind, we moved over here to the Groff building. This was in 1992. We moved in there. This was our first little boiler. And we invented tofurkey because tofurkey, there was nothing for vegetarians to eat at Thanksgiving. And so we started tofurkey, and it went kind of crazy. This was where we were at in 92. You can see we had gross sales in 92 of $181,000. But you go down here to the bottom line, oh, what's that? We lost $49,000. So we made 180 and we managed to lose a third of it. But it was like that, and then tofurkey came along. This was the Thanksgiving that I always went to, and we always tried to make stuffed pumpkin that wasn't so good, gluten roast, you couldn't cut it with a chainsaw. And then we invented the tofurkey roast. This is the first box. This was the first tofurkey. It had 8 drumsticks and a tofu stuffed roast. We didn't know what tofurkeys looked like in the wild, but we knew they had 8 legs because there was 8 drumsticks there. And then movie stars like Christina Applegate dragged it onto Jay Leno, and pretty soon this little company was putting the Washington Post on hold to talk to the New York Times, and it was crazy because we got all of this media thing. I even got a question on Jeopardy, or The Answer, which was brand of Thanksgiving meat alternative marketed by entrepreneur Seth Tibbott. They didn't get it. Nobody got it. And as my friend said, you're nothing until you're the Daily Double. But it was great publicity. And people started taking photos of the tofurkey all the way around the world. We now sell all this array of tofurkey products, not just holiday products, deli slices, sausage, ground product, hot dogs. They're all 100% vegan and non-GMO. So that's our big thing. There you go. In fact, we did a little study here and found that tofurkey, these are all other companies, most of whom are publicly owned now. We're family owned and independent, and we make the most sausages of any company in the world, actually, vegetarian meatless sausage. If you stretched them all out, I think they'd go Portland to Chicago on a yearly basis. So we make a lot of sausage, and deli slices are the same thing. So we're the biggest producer of refrigerated meatless deli slices and sausage on the planet. On meatless. So that's where this crazy thing that started in a little co-op went to. And we have all these frozen products now. We have pizza, we got pockets coming out, pot pies, quiche, and everything, like I said, is 100% vegan. Got a new plant right down there on the port. And this is a LEED Platinum food plant, which is hard to get. We're putting 400 something solar panels on the roof that'll funnel, among other things, the electric car charging station, which is free for anybody that's coming through and needs a charge. And who needs to stand in line at the gas pumps anyways? But this is the second LEED Platinum food plant in the US and the 6th in the world. So it's kind of a rare thing. It's very difficult to get. Thank you. And the biggest thing of our sustainability, it's great, and we have all of these little features. We're going to have tours of the plant in September 6th, 7th, and 8th. We're doing a big grand opening. You're all invited. We're going to have beer and free tofurkey sausages, and we do it because we feel like meat is the most, not just unsustainable, but the most unsustainable thing we got going on this planet, and we got to get off of it and eat less, and that's my little TED Talk. So, thank you. How'd I do in time, by the way?
Maybe a little over.
Oh,
Thank you, Seth. That was fantastic. So next up, we have Joel Pelayo, who works with Nuestra Comunidad Sana and the Next Door Inc. And he's going to be talking today about building community through gardening with Latino families.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think for all of us, it's a special day today. I think we have some celebrations here going on, but I'm gonna be a little disclosure here. Our last speaker, I think it's his birthday. Why we don't give him a hand? Okay. I came to the United States about 22 years ago. I was growing up in a very small village in Mexico. So my brothers are used to be farmers. So when they brought food home like fresh corn, I thought, well, this should be a miracle. But I didn't understand how that nice food, all the implications of work. So the idea is that later I developed my own awareness about how important it is to produce our own food. So we start with La Nueva Cosecha in partnership with La Clínica del Cariño, that community garden. And then we have a Raices project. That Raices project encouraged me to have a workshop with some Latino families, and I learned our Latino population here is growing up. So I say, why not? I introduced a community greenhouse project, and here we are. We start contracting at Pine Grove with Opportunity Connections, and here we go. We start to have our own starters, our own gardens outside the community greenhouse. So can we go put the next slide, please? So this is a real action, how our families are getting involved and committed to develop and to create their own projects on gardening. Of course, this couldn't be happening without the support of other community partners like the Master Garden. So we have some Latino families here supporting and learning to bring their own little greenhouses, as you can see here. Those are some of the families now on their own community garden. Can we go for the next slide, Lindsay? Okay. Some of you may know these people, maybe no, but I'm gonna say who's this person. He knows that he will be here. So he's Gabriel, my coworker, and this is the way how we start to start in our own little plants or starters, little by little. So it's the way how we develop in the community greenhouse. And of course, this couldn't happen without having that motivation to our children and families. So as you can see here, I think that little girl is starting to have her own concept to start or how to start a garden. So go next. Okay. Something that another community partners we have is the farmers market in Hood River. I start to participate in that community farmers market. And I remember the first booth I installed, I only have like 4 pounds of cucumbers and like 5 pounds of green beans. So I remember one of the directors of a program in Hood River came and she said, Joel, what are you doing here? I said, well, I am trying to start our community, greenhouse business. And he said, well, I don't think you have enough products to cover all these people. So she said, how about I buy all the whole stuff you have? I said, sure. And then I sold the whole stuff, but only, there was not much, but she was so happy. And our products was fresh, of course, and crunchy. Okay, this is another example how we have created our community greenhouse in Pine Grove with Opportunity Connections. So as you can see, and this is some of the cucumbers plants that we start to grow inside the greenhouse. So the idea was to grow and to have produce early cucumbers. And this bunch of radishes here, I should say that those radishes are coming from my home garden. So I garden around my house. So I thought there is no excuse if I went to grow veggies. So as you can see, some of them, they still looks very natural and fresh. This is another example of how I've been also gardening with my neighbor close to my house, and those are real huge green tomatoes, but I'm sure they became ripe very soon. Okay, more and more pictures about the different products. And these are also some experiments we start to develop. My wife used to be very involved, and we start to practice and to develop some ideas also to canned food. And I think we start to practice, and are being very successful. The only thing we're scared is about the habaneros chiles, so I don't think they will can those. This is another example of how in our farmers market, on Thursday farmers market, this is one of their community gardens that she's having her own produce for sale, and that's it. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Joel. So, quick announcement, we're going to be doing raffle prizes throughout the night. You guys are welcome to buy more raffle tickets right over at that table with Kate. So we're going to start that in just a few minutes after our Go Talk. So if you want raffle tickets, now's the time. Great, so up next we have Scott Sorenson, who is principal at Common Energy. And Scott's going to be talking about solarizing his neighborhood one house at a time.
I started out the day today down at the marina, and I thought I was going to talk about solar, but I think it's such a bigger picture in terms of solar and renewable energy. I was down there and watching the kids play lacrosse, and looked out on the river, and there's sailboats, and there's guys kiting, and we watched a bald eagle fly by. And then driving home, I see guys steelhead fishing down the river. And then driving through town, you see all these people. You can tell they're just so excited to be in Hood River. And it's amazing for me to be a part of that whole thing. This is what I dreamed of coming from Houston, Texas. I mean, this is the dream. I didn't belong there. I knew I didn't belong there. I quested to get out of there. The day I graduated from college, I went straight west. And it was for this kind of exposure, this kind of opportunity to just be involved with people who care about the kind of things that I care about. So I've had the opportunity the last 20 years building, the last 10 years with renewable energy to participate and to evolve into things that have really brought me a lot of passion. I feel very, very fortunate. Renewable energy is kind of a new thing for me. I feel like I was a disciple to Todd LaFay for 8 years. I walked next to Todd. Here for Todd, always. I felt like a great spectator, a passionate fan, but not really a participant. And Todd, through every single day of his life, did things in a way that I didn't even really get. I didn't understand the passion. I didn't understand the commitment. I just kind of fed on it and enjoyed being part of it, but never really participated. And I finally put a solar system on my house last fall. And it's like that's when everything clicked for me. It's like I've started up other people's solar systems for 10 years. But until I did it on my house, it felt like for the first time, I'm producing something. It's like I was a farmer. I started to appreciate farmers. Anyone who grows anything or produces anything, it was like finally, I'm starting to get a glimpse of what that's like. And I became a born-again renewable energy guy, you know? And everybody that argues it or says anything about it, you just think they're kind of stupid because it's like, it's renewable. And you just, I just find myself going, why do I have to argue this? Especially now it makes financial sense, but it's a renewable resource. We don't have any other real renewable resources. Solar is it. So when I was installing my solar system, you want to back up one? This is our roof, and so our kids, you know how it is if you guys have teenage kids. 2 14-year-olds, and they're helping me. Just getting them up on the roof is just an act of God to help. And then they get up there and it's like, it's the first time they've ever seen solar panels. Like I've been doing this for 10 years. And they're just like, wow, what do these do? What's going on? I'm confused. What's going on? And I'm like, well, these guys here, the sun hits them and then they make electricity. And so then I find myself, you can do the next slide, I turned around and I'm like, see, there's another one. And this is from, I'm sorry, is that better? This is to the north, there's another solar system right there. And then I looked over to the north here and I'm like, oh, and there's another one there across the street. And then you look a little farther and I'm like, oh, there's a garden. That has something to do with solar too, but we won't get into that with them. So then I'm like, oh, look, there's another solar system there. So then we look down the street and I'm like, oh, here's an organic cherry farm. There's some garlic going on here. We've got blueberries here. We've got Hoover Organics there. We've got another solar system there. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is the grid. This is the grid. I felt like I was the first one to come up with this. I'm like, this is the grid. We got to feed the grid. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, God, I got to coin this. This is an amazing phrase, feed the grid. We need bumper stickers, feed the grid. And I realized the grid is not about electricity. The grid is about everything. It's community. It's food. It's electricity. It's everything that binds us. And I started to think, well, what are the things that have to do with the grid that make sense to me? What can I teach my kids? And the first one was community. Giving to your community, feeding the grid. The second was food. Look at where we live. Nothing but great food. Feed the grid. The third one is electricity. We all need energy. Feed the grid. I have a construction company, and it's awesome. I love building stuff, but we don't feed the grid. We do nothing but take from the grid. So this helps me feel better about what I'm doing. Feeding the grid. And there's so many ways without having to spend a bunch of money to feed the grid. It can be taking less from the grid, making it easier to become more sustainable, which is a word that Todd LaFay kind of explained to me a couple of weeks before he died. He's down in his basement, and of course, he's asking me all these questions about what I'm doing. And I was talking about a house that I was building, and I said, you know, solar hot water, photovoltaics, I don't know if we can fit it in the budget, and blah, 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 blah. And he gave me this look like I was a complete idiot. And Todd was more patient than anybody with the argument over renewable energy. He would argue all night long, but he would respect you, he would shake your hand, he would smile with any controversy. He looked at me like, have you not been paying attention? Have you not heard or seen anything that I've done? He's like, you cannot even utter the word sustainable without production. You can't even use it. It is not, you can work towards sustainability, but unless you plan on producing, feeding the grid somehow, some way, you're never going to be sustainable. And I was like, oh my God, what an idiot. And that was like 2 years ago. So I feel like I'm being given this opportunity to teach people, especially the kids, the younger generation that are going to take on all of this that this group has started and be the stewards that we need them to be to sustain what's been started. And I think that it's absolutely critical that we figure out a way to relate to them, and we've got enough physical examples in our valley. And one more quick story that shaped me, humbled me. I have this friend, Melissa McDowell. She bought a Prius, and I remember going, what are you doing? That car doesn't make any sense at all. And granted, I'm a guy who's never spent more than $10,000 in a car. Any car that's new doesn't make sense. But the Prius, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. You're spending all this money for this electric car that'll never pay. It doesn't make any sense. I got the look like, you're a complete idiot, again. And she said, I want to be a part of the change. I was like, wow. So we feed the grid, and we teach our kids to be part of the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Next up, we have Mariah Reynold, who is the founder and owner of Casa Verde Csa. And she's going to be talking about feeding the grid, feeding Gorge families year-round. Mariah.
I want to encourage you to eat your veggies. I think that's what I'm here to do today. Go to the next slide. Our greenhouse is a 3,000 square foot greenhouse on the west side of the river on Alameda. And you can go to the next one. And we grow vegetables. We have about 10 different varieties, 20 different varieties, 30 different varieties. It seems like it's constantly growing and shrinking. But I really want to let you know that it's easy to buy local vegetables. And sometimes I have seen that people are scared of joining a CSA possibly, and I know that there's some of our CSA members here tonight, and I just want to let you know that it can be really easy. We allow our CSA members to turn it on or turn it off so they can go away on vacation and still get their veggies. We deliver 10 months out of the year. The 2 months that we're not here and on vacation, we do U-Pick. You can kind of click through all these. And we listen to the members. If you don't like something, if you don't like tomatoes, we don't deliver tomatoes to you. And so we really try to make a point of making it as easy as possible, because we know that the grocery store makes it ridiculously convenient, and yet there's something to be gained from, a lot to be gained from getting your vegetables locally. They're fresher, they have so much flavor, and it really connects you in with the seasonality. We offer tomatoes 6 months out of the year, from May through November, but still, you don't get them the other 6 months of the year. So there's something to look forward to, and yeah, so there's a certain amount of, you can go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so we learn what our members need. Actually, we go back one. I love this picture. So one of our members was traveling, wasn't at home that day, and he's like, do you mind putting it in the parking lot? I'm at the hospital. Just leave my car there and just put it in the back of my truck and I'll pick it up. So we'll do anything to get your vegetables to you, I guess is my point. We really want you to eat your veggies. So for me, it's about those relationships. And when I first thought of starting a CSA or starting a farm, I wanted to feed families is the way I was thinking about it. I didn't want to sell to grocery stores, and I don't really want to sell to restaurants. I will, but I don't really want to. I wanted to develop these relationships with families and get to know them. And I just got an invitation from one of my CSA members. They're like, we're having a barbecue, come on over. That's what I want, I want to be known and to know the people that are eating the vegetables, because I put a lot of heart and soul into it. And I want to have this exchange with my neighborhood and my community that's based on something that's real and meaningful and that feeds us. Growing our vegetables, we look at our greenhouse as a little ecosystem, as opposed to a big ecosystem like a normal farm would be, which is much larger and has chickens and cows and a lot more going on. We're doing everything in a really small space. We've got 3,000 square feet in the greenhouse and then a little bit outside, but we're trying to create that cycle of that nitrogen cycle and nutrient cycle inside of a small space. And so we've chosen to use fish as our nitrogen input. And so we have this fish water that the waste of the fish gets transformed into nitrogen and nutrients, and we irrigate all of our crops with this nitrogen, nutrient-rich water. And yeah, so, and then in addition to, so this is some of the crops. We have strawberries that we just started. We're really excited about these. Trying to do some second level growing off the ground. We do a lot of recycling. We ask all of our members to send us their yogurt containers to save any like clamshell containers, and we use we know, I mean, I know how terrible I feel about throwing them away, so I do everything I can to like use as many materials, reuse as many materials in the greenhouse. We work on our soil and our soil structure. That's pretty important. The worms, they're chock full. All our beds in our greenhouse are chock full of worms. And then we also deal a lot with pests in the greenhouse because it's such a lovely environment. So we bring in ladybugs and praying mantises, and we do everything we can to make sure that they feel at home to breed and make their home inside of the greenhouse. And then recently we're actually doing bees because we've been pollinating by hand. So we brought in some bees, and they are amazing pollinators, for sure. So yeah, I just want to close with saying that this idea of cooking I don't think I've cooked as much in the last 2 years as I cook all the time. I cook at home. We only eat our greens, I think, other than avocados and limes. I don't buy any other vegetables at the grocery store, and we eat really well. And I just want to encourage all of you to like cook more food, cook your veggies, like cook at home, stay at home. Like, I'm amazed. My food is so much better than anything I can eat out. And so prepare food for your family and invite your friends and neighbors over to join you for an Earth Day barbecue. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariah. All right, we've got 2 more Go Talks tonight. Next up is Jay McLaughlin from Mount Adams Resource Stewards, and he's going to be talking tonight about a community-owned forest up in Glenwood. Very cool project. We're excited to have him. Here's Jay.
Good evening. Hey, I'm just curious, does anyone know where that is? That's not in the family section back there. Okay, a few of you. Thanks for having me. And I'd venture to say that everyone in this room subscribes to the notion that if we don't take care of our natural environment, if we don't steward our natural resources, ultimately our human communities suffer. And I also subscribe to that notion. I'm of the opinion that as an environmental community, we often don't talk about the converse of that statement. That if we don't think and take care of our human communities, if our families are struggling, if our businesses are failing and our communities are collapsing, we don't have a lot of attention given to the health of our environment. And about 10 years ago, a number of us over on the Washington side of the river, mostly up in the smaller rural communities around Mount Adams, got together to form Mount Adams Resource Stewards. I don't know why the graphics aren't showing up here, but we had a nice little logo there, created by none other than Nate Ulrich back there, to really focus in on that idea, on that linkage between environmental health and community health. And focused in on a number of projects that weren't just conservation and orientation, but also on rural economic and community revitalization. And we quickly came to the realization that who owned our forests, especially in these areas that had such strong ties to the timber industry historically, that who owned our forests had tremendous implications for the quality of forest management that we were seeing and the well-being of our communities. Go to the next slide, please. I know there are a lot of things going on in these slides that we could talk about to the nth degree, but from a rural community perspective, especially for rural communities that were so tied to their forests, we increasingly feel like we're being cut out, we're being burned out, and lastly, we're being locked out of the forests that surround our communities and our homes. And if you go to the next slide, this was well captured by actually in a real TED Talk given by a colleague that works for the Nisqually Land Trust up in Western Washington last year, where he described rural communities in the Pacific Northwest, rural timber communities, as increasingly being like timber colonies. I don't know if you can see the graphics up here. This is from a Timberland Investors website, where they talk about this massive conversion of forest land ownership in the Pacific Northwest. Actually, this talks about the U.S. West and the U.S. South. Between 1977, when about 1% was held by institutional investors, to today, where it's over 83% of private forest lands are owned by these real estate investment trusts and institutional investment mechanisms. You know, and getting back to that timber colony idea, most of our logs, or an increasing amount of our logs, are exported overseas to countries like China, Japan, and South Korea, and the profits are shipped to the East Coast and overseas to often to anonymous investors. Locally, just to orient you quickly to this map of Mount Adams forest ownership, here's White Salmon, Trout Lake, Glenwood. This is the Gifford Pinchot National Forest in green, and the Yakima Reservation in brown. All these salmon-colored lands are currently owned by these timberland investment organizations that are based out of Toronto, Boston, Copenhagen. If you try to get to the bottom of who actually owns them, you can't. They're often Delaware-registered corporations, and it's, I guess, the one positive, both discouraging and encouraging aside of that, is that they tend to own lands on average for about 10 years. Now, in the case of most of these lands, we've had 4 different owners since 2000. So that presents us both with challenges as communities working in these areas and for the environment, but also with opportunities as we look at the next couple, 3, 4, 5 years, as there's going to be a lot of change in ownership in this area. So in response, we started asking as an organization in our communities, what can we do about this? Is there an opportunity for a nonprofit organization looking at land conservation opportunities and stewardship to actually purchase some of these forest lands for community-based management? And in 2008, we got a group of about 12, 13 community members that represented, you know, leaders in the community, conservation interests, loggers, ranchers, business folks. And we went back to New England, where they've been working on these kinds of projects for about 15 years. And this was actually a stop in Maine in the Down East Lakes region, where a group had raised over $32 million at that point in time to conserve over 30,000 acres of their working forest land. Let's go to the next slide. So we got back and we started gathering the folks in local communities, having some conversations about what we could do. Interviewed wildlife and fisheries biologists trying to help us prioritize lands, foresters, other folks that had an interest in that landscape. And in 2011, we struck out with our first purchase effort and bought the 100 acres surrounding the mill pond that's up in the Glenwood Valley. And here are just a few shots of what that particular property looks like. Some of the things that we've been engaged in that range from environmental education activities. We actually now have a forestry curriculum up there in the high school in Glenwood, to ice skating on the pond out in winters, which wasn't allowed under previous ownership, to stewarding the environment. There's a lot of restoration going on. As these companies have come in, they bought these forests up and they basically liquidated stands of timber. Right now we're working on our second acquisition. It's a 280-acre property that buffers the Convoy Lake National Wildlife Refuge, if you know that property, or this incredible place here in the gorge. It's about 2 miles of road frontage between Trout Lake and Glenwood. And so if anyone has any interest in ever visiting this property, it's a spectacular property, and there's no better time to visit it than in the upcoming weeks when the camas is in bloom out in the Convoy Lake National Wildlife Refuge and the birds are active. So happy to show you around. But that's our current fundraising hurdle. And from our perspective, you know, we see that there's so much interest and support and appreciation for this idea of bringing local ownership for our businesses and our institutions, not only local ownership, but local management. And from our perspective, that's something that should apply to forests as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jed. All right, we've got one more. Up next is Michael Becker, who has been instrumental. He's a teacher at Hood River Middle School and has been instrumental in the planning and building of the new LEED certified math and science wing. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Good evening. Well, I'm good to go. Okay, so we're just going to let that sit there for a sec, and we're gonna go someplace else here. This is a few years back, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. What I want to talk about is the process of education. We've got all these little kids here, all ready to do cool stuff, all ready to go out. Scott talks about all this great stuff of, like, how do we get folks going? And we keep using this idea of sustainability, this word sustainability, and for a long time, I think education was education about sustainability, and that was in that kind of awareness process, maybe in the late 70s, early 80s, when we all felt bad about pandas and whales, and we were all like, oh gosh, it's all my fault, what do I do? But it didn't really give us anything to do. It just said, these are all the bad things, right? And so then we moved into education about sustainability, and we started talking about systems, and we started taking a look at, like, how do these things really work together, and what's going on here? And then we started talking about global warming, and we started talking, it's like, again, all these problems, oh my gosh, how do we deal? And now, hopefully, at some point here in the not too terribly distant future, we're going to be able to get to education as sustainability. The idea that the process that people go through as they develop their formative abilities to be able to think about how they interact with and are responsible for changes in the world, that sounds like something I want to be a part of. That sounds like, okay, now we've got folks thinking about not just what's happening out there, but how do I interact with how that happens. So I work at Hood River Middle School. We got kids doing all kinds of crazy things. Stop by anytime if you haven't been. Doors always open. Kids are ready to take you for a tour anytime. Come to the market, all that kind of stuff. Our design methodology is called permaculture. And in 5 minutes, permaculture, oh my gosh, there's no way we're ever going to do that. But if you hear this thing about permaculture, I want you to think about two main ideas. The first is that permaculture has an ethical base. 3 things: care of the earth, care of people, and an intelligent redistribution of surplus, which is an interesting concept when you start thinking about how things are going right now. Alongside of permaculture, kind of like you're in the elevator and you're going up and you got 30 seconds to tell somebody what permaculture is all about. The idea is that permaculture is not so much about what are the elements in the system, but how do those elements interact with one another. And so permaculture is not a recipe card or this is permaculture and this isn't. Permaculture is like you put your permaculture glasses on and you start taking a look at what's going on in the system, and then you start looking for those connections. And in those connections is where the rich, meaty, sorry, tofurkey, good stuff is about where do all these interactions take place and what's going on. And when we get to those interactions, that's where kids come alive. And when you come and visit and you see the projects that my students are doing, I'm not doing it, I just stand around and, here's some tools, here's some stuff, you guys go for it. They're amazing, and they just totally get after it. But when we get to that point where they're the drivers and they're seeing this whole process, now we can even move beyond the idea of sustainability, and maybe we could get to regenerative systems. We could get to the idea that places don't have to get worse because we're there. We could actually be someplace and make it better over time. We could make it more productive. I feel like my time watching TV when I was 12 isn't completely wasted from the $6 Million Man. We can make him stronger, faster, better than he was, right? We can build those spaces. When you come look at our gardens right now, they were grass 4 years ago, and now there's these amazingly rich, diverse systems that's going on. So we can get beyond sustainability, we could get to regenerative. Maybe we could even get to biocultural abundance. How about that? Whoa, that'd be fun, wouldn't it? Biocultural abundance. Think about that one before you go to bed tonight. Okay. I always have to have homework assignments, so remember, that's what you got to start thinking about now. And so I was thinking, like, how am I going to do 5 minutes? What am I going to do here? So when we get to this idea of biocultural abundance, then we can start moving education away from a passive receptive system to far more of a transformative system where we're not having school be a place where young people are held until they're ready to go on to do something else, but it's a place where they start doing things with the information that they're working with, and they're amazingly good at it. We can get to this idea where we can understand the parts. That's a good place to go. Then we can facilitate the relationships. And then even better, if we're going to start building these more productive systems, we have to get to a spot where we can accelerate succession. And let's see, we got some, okay. So I'll go back just a sec. So this is 6 years ago as we started building our first gardens. And then the next picture is taken from the very same spot 4 years later. This spot was talked about at school as the forest, as if, of course, it had always been there, right? Okay? We went from this to that in 4 months. We went from this, little thinking, to that, a fish system, kind of like Mariah has, in 4 weeks. And we went from here to there in just a few months as well. So we got to go from this to that, right? Multi-generational, lots of good stuff going on, food, sharing stories, being able to interact as a community to develop places that get better and more diverse and richer and more productive and healthier over time. Thanks.